Welcome to the beautiful California Sierra Nevada. I am here on a hike, and I would like to share some thoughts with you about a fascinating book that I read and some of my thoughts about it. Why don't you join me? Come on. We in the United States sure seem to love the idea of meritocracy. It is built into our culture, it is foundational to the American dream. If you work hard, if you are virtuous, you will find success. Americans love to focus on the individual, but it seems the one collective narrative we do as a culture buy into is a fantasy that does us harm. We have such a strong belief in a meritocracy that Americans have a naive view of reality, of social and economic forces. Economic winners overattribute their success to their own work, and similarly, losers overestimate their failure to their own work, and we tend to underestimate larger societal forces. Perhaps a better way to say this is that we exaggerate our own importance to the exclusion of external forces and historical trends. This essay is based on the book The Tyranny of Merit by Michael Sandel, and I will talk more about that at the end. In this essay, I will make the argument that our believing in meritocracy too strongly has led to numerous societal harms in various ways. Firstly, by causing us to discount those we see as the losers of the economy, and even further, their suffering. Secondly, by causing apathy in the masses via a sort of spiritual belief that the meritocracy will sort things out. Thirdly, that we see meritocracy as a panacea that will solve all of our problems when it is anything but. Fourth, that meritocracy has led us to a technocratic government that fails to represent the nation's interests. And fifth, a perfectly functioning meritocracy will lead to a class of elite that pass on the benefit of their station to their heirs, leading to meritocracy becoming the problem that it was meant to solve. Part 1. Meritocracy as a weapon. The most simple argument against those that believe too strongly in meritocracy is those that worked hard and achieved success will argue that they did so due to meritocracy and ignore the many large external factors that helped them along the way. This makes them less inclined to have any desire to help those that are not well off. They made it on their own, in their mind anyway, and so should everyone else. The belief that the meritocracy works well for everyone leads to neglect of the already neglected. A further example of how believing too strongly in meritocracy can lead to bad political outcomes, the book gives us the example of Senator Mo Brooks, who wants the price of health care tied to the health of the individual. He wants to encourage people to be healthy, so healthy individuals will pay less and unhealthy individuals will pay more, which in the abstract is a good idea. But of course, this also punishes you for having a chronic illness or living in a food desert where you don't have easy access to healthy food, as is the case for many urban poor. These people would not be punished for their decisions, but for drawing the short straw in the lottery of birth, or for policy that fails to ensure the health of our own citizens.
Part 2. Meritocracy as an opiate.
This blind faith in the meritocracy is obvious in much of the political rhetoric of modern conservatism. However, it lies under the surface of modern liberalism as well. In the civil rights era, defenders of liberalism, that is, of equality, of justice, of law, felt a moral imperative to engage, to act. The world wasn't going to change itself. These days, we seem to have a blind belief that the arc of the universe bends towards justice. We forget that the only justice that ever exists in a society is the justice we create for ourselves. The arc of the universe is bent towards justice because of millions of people that have valued justice enough to fight for it. Meanwhile, in the modern zeitgeist, we are not actors in the arc of justice. Like the John Mayer song, we are waiting on the world to change. We have a blind faith that somehow the world will get better, that the legal institutions will favor equality and justice, and that we don't need to be actors in ensuring equality and justice materialize. The religion of meritocracy is not only a weapon that can be wielded against the downtrodden and suffering, it is also the opiate of the masses that consoles us and tells us we don't have to do anything. You can afford to be apathetic. Don't worry. Spiritual forces beyond our control will ensure that the world you wish to live in will prevail. Part 3, Meritocracy as a False Hope. A really important and fascinating point is that if you believe too strongly in the meritocracy, you will believe that the solution to inequality is upward economic mobility. The book argues that this idea started with Reagan, but that Presidents Clinton and Obama have argued this idea far more than Reagan did, so we now have a bipartisan consensus that upward mobility is the solution to poverty. I do think that this is important. The working class should have the same opportunities to education and high-paying jobs as everyone else. However, someone needs to do the working class jobs, and if the only solution is upward mobility, then we are arguing that jobs that need to exist for us to function as a society do not deserve to be sufficiently well paid for people to live with dignity. An additional problem from this over-reliance in the mystical forces of meritocracy is that if you strongly believe that your career will be impacted by societal forces, then you will put a lot of thought into choosing your career wisely, since from this vantage point, you being good at a job is no guarantee of success. Meanwhile, if you have a blind faith in meritocracy, then it doesn't matter what discipline you choose, for the meritocracy will make sure that you, a hard-working, honest individual, will rise to the top. It is akin to the invisible hand of the market. There is a common belief that the invisible hand of meritocracy ensures that the moral, the hardworking, the virtuous will see economic success, and the depraved, the lazy, will live in poverty. I will be rewarded not for choosing a career that is needed, goes the thinking, not for providing value to others. I will be rewarded because I will deserve it, because I will have worked hard for it. I will be meritorious. In a culture that believes in the invisible hand of the meritocracy, the actual needs of the economy and of the country are downplayed, and it is easy to fall into a trap where there is a large disconnect between the desires of those starting their careers and the actual demand for jobs in the economy. And so we see that there are industries with seemingly unending appetites for more workers, and industries with overabundance where the highly educated have fierce competition over mediocre jobs. We could easily fix this problem, or at least significantly mitigate it, but for decades we have seemed uninterested in doing that. To fix this problem would require confronting the blind faith in meritocracy. We would need to admit that cultural narratives that define who we are as a country are wrong. And we are not prepared to do that, so the problem will continue with no serious solutions even proposed. Part 4, the Technocratic Meritocracy. Who is deserving of being a congressional representative? Who has the right personality, the right constitution, the virtue required to engage in good governance? Increasingly, we have decided the answer to that question is the highly educated. They aren't just knowledgeable and informed on a particular niche of study, they are good, they are virtuous. I think we can certainly agree that, in general, having an educated legislature is a good thing. However, as numerous minorities are gaining representation in Congress, the working class are losing representation. This technocratic argument for an educated Congress ignores that many of the most important qualities that determine one's ability to govern well have little to nothing to do with education. It is crucial for good governance that our leaders strongly believe in equality before the law, in rights, in justice, in trying to improve people's lives. I would argue that we have not seen a significant correlation between well-educated congressional representatives and representatives that stand for the most important values of governance. The book makes this really interesting point that JFK had a particularly technocratic and educated government. He wanted to ensure that he was relying on the most educated, the best, the brightest, and they steered us into the Vietnam War. Our view of the educated as the meritorious, as those deserving of government position, has steered us away from the guiding principles of good governance that actually matter. So while the professional class enjoys a meritocracy that exists as much as exists in any other rich nation, the working class have fallen far behind and don't even have meaningful representation in Congress. In the Gilded Age, we had a highly technocratic government. People without degrees were highly uncommon in the federal government. However, as we built our social democracy and a nation that worked better for the interests of the majority of the country, it became more common to have people without university degrees in Congress. If we desire to have a country that works not just for the professional class, but for the majority of the country who do not hold degrees, then it is naive to assume that we can do this well without representation. We need to throw out the idea that the only people that are suited to Congress are those that meet our meritocratic ideas of having worked hard and having the virtue that we associate with those with tertiary degrees. We do need to elect people with integrity and honesty and who are sincerely interested in being civil servants. But our meritocratic beliefs are leading us to do the opposite.
Part 5, the Meritocratic Elite.
And finally, meritocracy inevitably leads to a sort of aristocratic elite that pass on their wealth and success to their children. This is a really significant failing of meritocracy because it leads to the exact problem that it was supposed to fight. In elite universities, for example, it used to be your economic class that guaranteed entry. Although this still exists to a limited degree, it is now primarily the meritocratic elite, not the class elite, that are guaranteed entry. However, in effect, there's little meaningful difference. Grades, SAT scores, health and wellness are all strongly correlated with income. The winners of meritocracy ensure that their children go to the best schools, get the best test prep, their physical health is seen to by very high quality and expensive health plans. Even a well-functioning meritocracy cannot be the system we rely upon for equality and justice. Meritocracy itself, even when functioning as it should, ensures unfair benefit to the advantaged and unfair harm to the disadvantaged. In conclusion, we here in the United States are largely naively ignorant of the various societal forces that shape the country as it is today. As a people, we have a long tradition of rejecting collectivist narratives and focusing on the individual. Being so hyper-focused on the individual leaves us unable to comprehend and therefore fight the forces that do us harm. From threats to democracy like fascism, to refusing to acknowledge class conflict, to failing to see the modern Gilded Age that threatens even our sacred free market, we as a nation tend to reject narratives based in collective action out of the belief that a nation of hardworking individuals will overcome anything simply through gumption and the virtue of the independent action of its citizens. Unfortunately, the one collective narrative that we do believe in causes us to delude ourselves, detach from reality, and engage in self-harm as a nation. Of course, meritocracy exists to some extent here, as it does to a certain extent in all nations. But our belief in the power of meritocracy needs to be based in examination of reality, in understanding the actual power structures that exist, and not blind faith in mystical market forces. This essay has been a mixture of reporting on the ideas in the book, The Tyranny of Merit, as well as some of my own expounding on the ideas therein. The book is very interesting, and if you find the ideas I have presented interesting and would like to know more, I will recommend the book. There's a lot of really interesting ideas that I couldn't fit into this short essay. I will leave a note with more thoughts about the book in the description for those interested. If you enjoyed this content, I plan on having more coming, so please consider subscribing if this is the sort of thing that you're into, and feel free to follow me on Twitter if you like. Thanks for coming with me on this hike on a beautiful winter's day here in the Sierra. I'll see you next time.